What's happening, guys? So I have gone and done a thing that I said that I would not do. I have traded my Kawasaki Z900 RS Cafe for a different motorcycle. Matter of fact, it's popping its little head up right behind us. And I don't want this video to be about the bike that I picked up. It is retro themed though, so at least I stuck with the motif. But what I wanted to do is talk about that Kawasaki Z900 RS Cafe in retrospect. And you can't talk about that bike without mentioning the looks. The RS and the RS Cafe are amazing to look at. Kawasaki absolutely slayed it with their take on a 1970s resto mod, if you will. And that's what drew everybody to that motorcycle. And rightfully so, it's what drew me into it as well. The ergonomics of that motorcycle are amazing. I love the way the bike felt to just sit on, the riding position, the foot peg placement, everything just felt just right with that bike. But as awesome as that might seem to be, that's about where the awesome stopped with that bike. If you look at the power from the factory, it's okay. It's adequate, but it's just okay. Now, I get it, power's subjective, so I don't want to hang on that too much, but I will touch on that again here in just a minute. But what I do want to talk about are some other shortcomings and some things that drove me away from that motorcycle. The second thing, and one of the biggest, was the suspension. Guys, the RS platform is weirdly sprung, both front and rear. It's like the front is overly sprung and the rear is way undersprung. And try as I might, I could never really strike a balance. And when fitted with newer, fresher, stickier tires, what I thought was a good suspension setup turned into, well, just a restart from the problems that I had before. Better tires meant that I had a faster entry speed into corners, faster entry and exit speed when talking about long sweepers, and it was loading up the suspension more with the higher velocities, and well, next thing you know, we're back to having wiggles and squiggles and things that just normally it wouldn't have had if it just had worse tires or, well, the same suspension setup with a less than performance-oriented tire. And a rider that wasn't trying to push it past maybe a certain limit, I'll admit to that. But it's not just the suspension, it was the gearbox in that motorcycle. And the gearing in general. So the gearbox, I think the gearing first, second, third, fourth, and fifth is not long enough. The bike needs longer legs in those gears. Even more long than when I put the 16-tooth front sprocket in that motorcycle. It comes with a 15, and that was in an effort to just carry those gears out a little bit farther. With the way that the engine is tuned, it makes a broad torque band, and it can really take advantage of the longer gears. It can grunt against that leverage and make the motorcycle feel a little bit less twitchy and a little bit more conventional, if you will, with its power delivery. But that's not the case. And notice I only mentioned 1 through 5. That transmission is a 6-speed, but that 6-speed is an overdrive. And so it's like you miss a window of gearing between 5th and 6th, and really that window would start at about 3rd gear. To extend 4th gear and 5th gear to match that 6th gear would have been perfect for that bike. It would allow the motorcycle to really utilize that mid-range torque that it's making and have an experience that is a lot more traditional. And that's not what you get. So the bike always felt like it was running outside of the gear that you were in. It was like it was falling upstairs, is another phrase that people will choose to use when something is just over geared. But I did what I could to try to mitigate that, and it was better, but certainly not where it needed to be, not in a traditional motorcycle gear spread way. But the second thing was the shifting itself. I even put one of the shaft stabilizers on that motorcycle, and it helped a lot, but it shouldn't have to have something like that. First gear to second gear was always a bit notchy. The 5th to 6th gear was real notchy. It was solved substantially by the shaft stabilizer, so there's that at least to talk about. But the fact that it just didn't have a more traditional gearbox may have been what tipped me over, although the last time I took it out, the suspension being a little bit wonky, that might have done something too. we'll see. By the way, yes, I did check the tire pressures before I rode. Other aspects of the bike that are so-so, the brakes in that motorcycle. You know, people complain about the brakes on that bike. I find them to be perfectly fine. I wouldn't necessarily complain about them, and I'm not really even wanting to talk about them other than to say, look, if people say that they're okay, they're really good. And by today's standard, okay is like race spec, right? So I don't really want to get too deep into that. I never personally had an issue with the brakes. But that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I did a lot of work to that motorcycle to bring it up to snuff in terms of power. I would say that by the time that I was done, that 948cc four-cylinder was making middle of the pack, middleweight horsepower. Not a bad place to be, but certainly not in the league that you would have hoped that that engine would be in a package that looks and has the attitude of the Z900 RS or the RS Cafe. So there you have it in a nutshell, guys. Those are the reasons why I decided to let that motorcycle on. Somebody is going to get that bike. They're going to love it. They're going to cherish it. They're going to absolutely adore it, as I did and still do. But it was time to go ahead and take a little bit of a step up. She's still a retro hot rod, so we're not getting away from that. But it was time to go back to something with a little bit more built-in strengths that I'm looking for in a motorcycle that I'm not only going to ride a little bit more aggressively, but in general, I wanted some of the more stable safety aspects that this motorcycle is going to offer. Plus, it's a little bit of a familiar platform for me. So with that, guys, post up your comments, let me know what you think, and we will catch you on the next one. That's a wrap.